Hello and good morning, everybody. This is Jeremiah. We are having another webinar. Now, come on, admit it. When you were looking forward to Friday all week, it was because of the Land Effects webinar, wasn't it? It was. Just admit it. It's a wonderful thing, and we're here. If you are new to Revit or even just pondering Revit, if you've been a long time Land Effects CAD user and you're like, what is all this buzz with Revit? You'll get something from this webinar. If you've been using our planting effects plugin for Revit for the last year plus that we've had it, and you just still want to see how it's going, you're in the right place. If you're thinking of switching to it from doing everything manually in Revit, you're in the right place. This webinar is going to kind of cover all of you where you're coming from. You will definitely have some things to take away, no matter your experience level or knowledge of Revit. We're really going to kind of cover a little bit of everything. So that being said, I do want to mention we do have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen there. That stands for questions and answers. And if you click that right now, just as a test, you'll see you get a little thing, little dialog box there for Q&A. What's nice is you'll be able to see the answers that we type to other people's questions, as well as, making it easier for you to type a quick question. I'm sure you'll have some, and you're with this ride with us live and in person. So that Q&A feature really is a nice little addition to the webinar. So just recommend you have that turned on. Otherwise, buckle up and get ready. We're going to have a fun time. Amanda, it's time to take it away.
Thanks so much. And hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Marin. And if you've seen any of our videos, hopefully I'm a familiar voice. So I'm a landscape architect here at LandFX, and I specialize in BIM workflows, training, technical support, and development of our tools. In particular, I also help lead our Revit content and development teams. So that's me, but I wanted to start today's webinar with a quick story that I've been reminded of lately. So, we had a wonderful guest speaker several years ago, Michael Bain. You might have seen his webinar on our website on implementing land effects across a multi-office firm. So that webinar was about the AutoCAD land effects plugin. But after settling on the title of today's webinar, Getting Started, I kept thinking back to one thing he said was a driver for their firm moving from another CAD software to AutoCAD at the time. And I thought it was a really good jumping off point for thinking about going from CAD to Revit as well. So he said it was very much a market-driven decision. The majority of people were not using the other CAD software that they were using at the time. They were using AutoCAD, and they were actually perceived by other consultants as being hard to work with. So they wanted to change that. They heard that exact sentiment out on the street, and that was not the perception that they wanted to have for their firm. So that was the main driver. They needed to be in the right place software wise, using the software everybody else was using. But also another factor was the increase in BIM projects in New Zealand, where they were at the time, or still are. BIM was and still is gaining a large foothold there and everywhere across the world. So, a majority of the projects actually had architectural consultants as the lead. Therefore, the architects were writing the BIM execution plans, and they were dictating that the outputs were expected to be delivered in Revit, which meant their firm needed to be in that world as well. They needed to have Revit on board and be able to deliver outputs in Revit as well as AutoCAD. And AutoCAD seemed to be a better fit with connecting with Revit than the CAD software they were using at the time. So it was a good time for them to make that switch. So this spearheaded their transition to CAD and actually to Revit as well. So I want you to keep this very real situation in mind as we start today's outline, and maybe take a moment if you're attending this webinar live to open up the chat and type in why you're watching this today. Maybe start a little discussion between those already adopting Revit and those just kind of considering it at the moment. And this is what we will be going through today. We're going to start with the when you should use Revit, who should use Planting FX specifically, and a little bit of why. And then we're kind of going to jump into it. Not too slide heavy today. I'm going to actually try and show you installing live. I'm going to be successful at it. And also, we're going to be doing a bit about obviously learning how to learn planting FX quickly as a beginner to land effects in general, or as a beginner to the planting FX tools in Revit. Might be a good refresher for those even experienced in land effects. And then we're going to kind of go into assigning a planting FX project number, which is the first step you got to do when you're starting up a project using the planting FX tools. We're going to go through adding a species, an actual species, editing the parameters and assigning families and placing them, or even assigning plants to areas and placing those. Tagging and labeling, schedule, color render. You can see a little bit of that preview here. And we're also, for those people who were amazing beta testers, we are out of beta, of course, for over a year now. But I wanted to dedicate a lot of time to new features. And then we want to kind of talk through our development roadmap, because everybody attending here, you are a part of that as well. So let's kind of get started with our first little bit. So when should you use Revit for a design? Uh, I've had this conversation a lot with people, especially um, at expos and that, where they're like, why should I use Revit? Uh, one of the things I say is that based on the conversations I've been having with landscape architects, even the jump between last year and this year, so many more are either starting to use Revit or heavily considering it or have been using it already. So that population is dramatically increasing. I would say that uh, Revit has a pretty good stronghold right now, but it's swiftly moving towards being a primary staple of software for landscape architects. And what I say to everybody is, it does have a bit of a learning curve, so it's better to start it with maybe 1 or 2 projects right now and get through that learning curve in the next 5 years, so that in 5 years, when it's like, well, why aren't you using Revit? Then you already have that baseline, and you're not trying to implement something in a rush because you're now perceived as being out of touch with the future of software. So obviously, if your company primarily uses Revit, you're probably already using it, and of course you're going to use it for the design. Um, but then, like I kind of mentioned in that story at the beginning, positioning your company as being easier to work with. You can apply for more jobs because you have that breadth of knowledge across software to be able to be compatible with their requirements. And then I want to add in here, if you are a student, obviously you get a free academic license for Revit, and actually for the Planting FX for Revit plugin too. Now is a great time to challenge yourself and take the time that you have to learn it and be able to kind of put yourself up there on the resume stack as being able to bring something new to a firm, since this is it's still being adopted and not widespread adoption yet. So that puts you in a good position right off the bat. But then we also wanted to talk a little bit about, why are landscape architects using more Revit? Like, what is the immediacy? I keep hearing about Revit. What should I do? So Revit was originally built for architects, so of course they like it and are telling us to use it. But in the same kind of fashion, InDesign is great for illustrators, but not so much as a primary landscape design tool. Uh, what makes Revit a good move for LAs now besides outside pressures? So these are some of the things we kind of brainstorm with this. So this shouldn't be the sole reason. So what are the other reasons? Basically, while Revit at the moment might not be ideal for every project, it is something to keep in mind that switching platforms back between CAD and Revit can make life a lot more difficult for a drafter. And it's usually better to have narrowed down your scope of the amount of software that you expect all of your designers to be able to work in fluently. So being able to move your home base to Revit will help things that way too and bring some of these other benefits. So BIM is more than just a buzzword. It's just simply a good design process where you are taking some of the things you think about um, in AutoCAD more towards the end of the project over to the beginning of the project. So setting up all the data behind all the objects that you're placing at the start before you place them. And then when you place them, you obviously have a faster 3D visualization because you're drawing both the 3D and the 2D at the same time. You also have opportunities in Revit that you don't have in AutoCAD, like dynamic quantities in schedules and a little bit in tags too. It gets a little tricky with group tags on plants, but we're getting there more and more. And also, I've used Civil 3D as well extensively in my practice, and I have found that the 3D visualization and just usability of the 3D realm in Revit is easier than it is in Civil 3D. Civil 3D is great for creating um, uh, it has more built-in out-of-the-box features for creating graded landscapes, whereas Revit, it is getting better, but mostly because of plugins that are available for grading. So I have found, though, that then placing the plants on top of that 3D surface is easier in Revit than it is in Civil 3D. And then the last part, which is the big thing we're talking about today with planting effects, is that plugins have finally filled the gaps for landscape architects working in Revit. So now is a great time to get in, especially because it's just going to get better and better from here. But it is absolutely feasible right now and beneficial to your workflow. We're going to be talking about that. Who does planting effects in particular as a plugin on Revit? Who benefits from that? So anybody placing a plant who wants the species, the install size, and the appearance to be more accurate and faster. Can you do that in native Revit? Of course you can. You can set up almost anything in there, but making it feasible and practical for anybody to use in Revit right off the bat, that's where Planting FX comes in. So longtime Revit users even who want a bit more flexibility, like the traditional practice in Revit is you create a family for a particular species and you set up all the information about that species ahead of time. But in landscape architecture design, you guys use a lot of different symbols, as you can see here in the plant schedule. And these symbols are very diagrammatic. They are not necessarily supposed to be tied to any particular species, and you can reuse symbols from design to design, and you don't want to be strung up on a narrow species list. You want to be able to explore and improve your plant palette in your designs. So that's what we're offering with that flexibility with over 50,000 species. Literally, you can add any species you want. You're not even limited to the 50,000 that we have, but also offering you that better symbol library right out of the box. So you might have a good symbol library right now with your current setup that you have manually configured for Revit over the years, but do you have 1,000 2D symbols for trees and shrubs? Probably not, and we already have that. So you get that benefit out of the box with planting effects. So, and then what we're also doing as a big thing with this plugin for Revit is we are trying to make it easier for landscape architects who don't know Revit, who weren't taught Revit in school, to be able to pick up Revit and transition. So that's what we mean by getting started into Revit as well for today. And then fourth, BIM managers, of course, who have been hearing from their landscape design staff that it's so hard to get into Revit and some pushback. This is something that you can offer to them of, hey, this might be a great way for you to do at least some projects in Revit. Let's have a go at it. Let's see how it works. And then, of course, any firm that is already using Land Effects in AutoCAD, this is going to make your life transitioning into Revit so much easier because all of that cloud data that you already have in AutoCAD transfers automatically into the Planting Effects plugin for Revit, including your preference set, which is huge because that has all of um, your plant sizes and that sort of thing. And I just wanted to kind of highlight, especially for longtime Revit users, we have symbols in Revit schedules, as you can see right here. That is right off the bat a big one, and we are including these JPEG symbols for all of our 2D symbols right out of the box, and they automatically connect in parameters. Okay, let's keep going. So I gave myself a challenge for today's webinar, and installing is easy enough for me and fast enough for me to show live. So I'm going to do that because I feel like probably showing this live is going to really help spearhead, what do you call it? Um, get to help a lot of questions that we have with the installation process beyond what words and screenshots on a documentation page can. So let's kind of exit this screen share for now and go here into my virtual machine. I'm on a Mac, by the way. I'm running Revit inside Parallels in a Mac in order to work with Planting Effects and also Revit because you have to do that in a Windows environment. You can only install land effect or planting effects on Revit full version. It does not work on Revit LT. And that's because Revit LT doesn't allow any plugins. So you do need to have a version of Revit. You can have multiple versions of Revit installed on your computer. That's fine. Planting Effects will install onto all of those. And I just have 2024 on here for now. And I'm going to go over here to the Land Effects homepage, and I'm going to go to support, just clicking on it. There's my support page, and there's Kurt, the Revit developer, our Revit developer. Hi, Kurt. I'm going to go in here and type in install Revit. Download and install the Planting Effects plugin for Revit. Click on that. And we can kind of start going through here. So it is important that you do read through this. I'm going to give you the speed run version, but I do recommend, I'm basically going to go through it quick, but you should read everything. In particular, I'm going to make some highlights. It only works right now for 2022, 23, and 24. We'll go over our roadmap, but 2025 is imminent. And then again, does not work on Revit LT. For prerequisites, you will need a folder for your Planting Effects Revit library. I'll show you how to set that up. You will need a Land Effects support ID. If you don't have one, you should have one if you use Land Effects in AutoCAD. You do have one. So we have ways for you to find that support ID. If you don't have one and you're new to Planting Effects or Land Effects in general, then you can go ahead and go to landeffects.com/trial, and you can do a 15-day trial just to try it out. And then very importantly, if you are a existing Land Effects user, your office needs to be on cloud data. Click on these links to learn more about how to find out if you were on cloud data and what the difference between cloud data and local data is. That's because our Revit plugin is cloud data only. So for new LandFX users who are pretty much Revit only, you don't have to worry about this. You're not installing cloud, or you're not installing a LandFX server otherwise, so you don't need to worry about that. You are already cloud data if you install this plugin. Let's keep going, and I have a installer link. I'm going to click on that, and it goes pretty fast because it's very small. And I'm going to open up that folder. There it is, and I'm going to run it. I'm going to say yes, and then just wait for that for a second, but this is actually quite quick. I accept, next, support ID. You will use your support ID, not this one. And we're gonna go ahead. It's been activated, okay, install. And this will be done in about 2 seconds, and then we'll be able to open up Revit to start using it. But while we're opening up Revit, so it's been successfully installed, I'm going to close. If you get any error messages, by the way, during this process at all, usually the best bet is to go over back to our support page, always screenshot your error messages, any error message for any software, screenshot it, get into that habit. Type in the error message verbatim into here, and usually you'll find a documentation page with a quick solution. If not, you can search how to open a ticket, how to submit a technical support ticket, and use that to reach out to us. So I'm going to close this, and we are going to go over here, close this, and we're going to open up Revit. Now, Revit itself takes a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to show you how to set up the library while we wait for Revit itself to open. Yeah, there it goes. Okay. So I'm just going to place this on my C drive for now. If you are an existing LandFX client user, you are going to find you will want to connect to your LandFX folder, most likely on the shared drive that you are on. By the way, I'm going to click always load over here. So if you have a shared letter drive with a lot of your files and folders, your LandFX folder is probably there. So you do want to locate that and not make one on your own if you're in a company that already uses LandFX. You want to connect to the same folder as everybody else and kind of share your family library with everybody else too. If you are just trying this out for the first time, you might want to just create a folder on your C drive and call it LandFX, call it a day there. And yeah, that should be it. So I'm going to go into here. This is empty because I don't have AutoCAD installed on here. So I don't have the AutoCAD version of LandFX installed. And I just created this folder called LandFX. So I also created a folder myself. So right click, new folder, and I called it Revit. Now, this is my organization style. So you don't have to go this deep, but I like to have it all laid out like this. Okay, so I have libraries. Now, what you need to do in here, even if you only have one version of Revit installed on your computer, make a new folder and call it the year of Revit that you have installed. So if you have more than 1 year of Revit installed, 2023, and you have to do this, even if you only have 1 year of Revit installed. Because Revit family files are not backwards compatible and they are very awkward forwards compatibility. They are not silent about their forwards compatibility. So what we've done is we've created libraries for each version so that it just loads and it doesn't give you 100 warning messages as it's loading. So you will want to create little folders like this, and these are empty, and that's it. That's all you have to do. But you do have to create these, and they will fill themselves. And we are going to connect to them. So I now have Revit open over here. So I'm going to go over to new, and I'm just going to do a basic template here to start us off and kind of show us a little bit of the basics and getting started. So the very first thing after we install is in those installation steps, one that people frequently miss is the library. So we just set up those folders, but you actually have to connect to those folders. So we've done all this. Let's keep going. Here we go. So we clicked always load. We're at 2L. We need to find the planting ribbon, and we need to go over to general preferences, and we need to open up that so that we can fill in our library location. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we are. I'm going to go over to Planting FX, and I'm just going to click on here to pull a license. There we go. And it's going to ask me immediately for a library location. So I'm going to browse, and this is Revit 2024. So I'm going to go to this PC and C drive because that's where my LandFX folder is. Again, repeating, if your LandFX folder is already set up elsewhere, go there. And you will have created a Revit folder in that LandFX folder elsewhere, but I'm going to go down to my 2024 folder and just click that and click OK. And there it is. That's all I need to do. So I'm going to say OK. And already in here, if I kind of go back in here, you can start to see the connection if you're existing LandFX user. I already have a lot of these preference sets in here from my office already set up. I'm going to go down to Imperial 2024 is one that I've kind of manipulated a bit, and I can say okay. And then with that set, I've got my library set up. I can go into my projects, and we can start choosing a project number. However, I'm going to take a quick moment because I have seen some questions coming in. So I wanted to check in with you, Jer, on are there any questions so far that we could answer at the moment?
We got a couple good questions so far, but they are, better for when we talk about kind of the future future roadmap of Revit. So no questions so far on just kind of what you're showing where you are. So we'll address those when we get to the roadmap.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah, guys, don't be shy. Open up that Q&A. Type in whatever's on your mind about, hey, what's holding you back from moving into Revit. Maybe we can help you with that. So assigning a project, if you are a LandFX user, you will see all of your projects in here. If you are a brand new Planting FX, LandFX user, or doing a trial, this will be completely empty, and that's okay. So in Revit, I'm going to close out of this really quick. In Revit, under Manage, your Revit files already have project information. And if I scroll down here, your Revit file already has a project number. It might not have a project number if it's a brand new template like this, but if it's a project the architects have already been using, they likely have a project number already in here. If you're using LandFX, we want to match that. Keeping in mind that Revit reserves the project numbers, I believe, 1 through 9, including 01 through 09 and 001 through 009, and also 0 and 00 and 000. So don't use those. Use a slightly more specific project number because we have noticed problems connecting to projects with those numbers. But you want to match that. So over here, Planting FX, under Projects, you can create a new project and give it a project number. So I'm just gonna call this 2024 001. And my name is uh Getting Started Webinar. So you do want a project name that's descriptive. If you haven't done this before, like the address or the client name or the location, like a description of what the project's name is. All of those are good things. So I'm going to say, okay, it creates that project. It lists it in here. It jumps down to it, and I am going to open it. And in opening it, I can now go into my plant manager. If you click the plant manager before assigning a project, it's going to bump you right back to the project list. And basically it's trying to tell you, please assign a project first. So this project is brand new and it's empty. So that means we can start assigning things. We can start adding species into here. So I'm going to go ahead and click new. And here is our massive plant database. You can see up here 51,526, and you will find in a week or two from now that number will have ticked up because we are constantly adding new species. I can search this database for literally anything, botanical name or common name. So I love Dawn Redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboides. You can find it down here along with so many varieties of this. One thing that makes Land Effects so powerful is our plant database, and especially our attention to detail on accuracy for these plants. So you'll see here like a Dawn Redwood like Jade Prince. One mistake we frequently or we found in people's drawings and projects is that they will mistakenly try and add in Jade Prince as Metasequoia glyptostroboides Jade Prince instead of its actual registered trademark variety name. So we make sure that everything's spelled correctly, everything is the real variety to make this whole process so much easier. So we can just add in one of these and that adds it right into the project over here. Um, of course, we can also search for general, more common names like oak, and it's going to narrow down. Obviously, a lot of things kind of refer to themselves as oaks, but here's Quercus right here. And we also have here in the plant database more information. So you see one of these orange exclamation marks, definitely click on it and see what it has to say about that plant. So that is used for synonymous names, especially when there is an old name, botanical name for a plant and a new botanical name for a plant. And there are even some plants that are currently in transition where people still use the old name even at nurseries. So we do allow you some flexibility for how you add the name into your system. We recommend, of course, that you refer to your local nurseries to make sure that you are using the name that they refer to the plant as. But at this point, you really don't need to worry about plant size yet. That will come. Right now, we're only worried about the species. So I can go over into, I'm gonna add bicolor, and you can see I've actually added in some of my own species in here, which you can absolutely do by clicking new plant and create a new species not currently in here or a variety not currently in here, add it, and you can add it right away. But it also lets us know about that so that we can verify it and add it for everybody else. I'm just going to add this one to the project as well. There we go. I have 2 trees started. Now, if you want to add shrubs, you can go in here. I'm just going to add it and I'll explain in a moment the difference between these two. So I'm just going to go down here and maybe add spice bush. Sounds great. Add to project. Done. And lastly, we want to add ground covers. So the difference as I'm adding this one in between trees, shrubs, and ground covers, they are suggestions, not rules. Let's see, coral bells, which means they are just categories relating to how this plant will appear in the drawing. So trees and shrubs both use families, but they pull from different family libraries because shrubs, especially shrub 2D symbols, are a bit more simple than tree symbols for 2D. And then, of course, the 3D symbols are going to be wildly different between trees and shrubs, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and add one of these and maybe one of these as ground covers. So ground covers, I'm going to click done, are actually areas, plant areas. So they require a hatch and a spacing, but you don't have to have a spacing. And I'll go into those more as we edit it. So let's start with editing a tree. So I'm going to edit that one. Aha! The first thing it tells us, a 3D view is required to use planting effects. Would you like to create a default 3D view? It does actually need a view with the default 3D name in the plan. We use that in order to accurately place and host families onto floors and topography. So I now have a 3D view. I can go ahead and place one of these. I'm actually going to go to site first. Let's go to my site plan and I'm going to make a floor. Architecture, let's grab a floor. And I'm just going to make a rectangular floor up here so that we can see it. There it is. That's just a generic floor at the moment. So I'm going to grab this and now I'm going to edit it. And we have this right here. So I'm going to go over to, we can add in all the detail in here. So you can see the botanical name and common name are in here, but they are editable at this point. And at this point, they are copies from that master database. So you can change these and it won't change what's in the master database at all. You can also change the plant code. It can be 2 letters, it can be 1 letter, it can be up to 7 characters total. So this is 7 characters with a space in between. You can add remarks. I like to use this for like multi-stem. You can add a cost to these. I like supply and place costs for these. $400 is a good round number for this species. And then, of course, you can go ahead and use container root ball size. Let me go really quickly. I'm going to say okay to this, and I'm going to come back. Okay. And I'm going to go over to planting effects and just double check. Yeah, that did not pick up the right preference set. So I want to set that to the right preference set because I have multiple. If this is a first time install, you're going to have imperial and metric to go off of. And basically the only difference between those in Revit is the plant sizes available by default, but those are editable. Customizable. Okay, here we go. That's what I wanted to see. 2 of these fields available. That's how our defaults are set up. So I can go in here. This is the default list of sizes for imperial projects. And then, of course, like I said, we have metric and the default sizes in here are all metric sizes as well as calipers and that sort of thing. So I can go in and maybe say I want to install this as a 2.5-inch caliper and the container's type is a wire basket. Again, these are defaults and you can customize and curate this list. You can delete entries, you can add new entries. You can even change this field and this field's entire title. This is in the system, this is just kind of known as field 1 and field 2. We have 6 fields available that you can customize and use. So you can name them whatever you want. Totally up to you. This is what I mean by this being so flexible. We've just found that every landscape architect does this differently, and we lean into it and let you. So you can change the symbol width, This is a bit narrower, so I might actually leave it at 20 feet. And then the magic is, of course, with all the symbols. You can see all these symbols already in. I am currently in the process of upgrade or adding even more. We have, of course, diagrammatic. And then at the moment, right now, all of these are hard linked to a 3D symbol. So if I switch this, sorry, over to 3D, you can see these diagrammatics are all kind of generic 3D, very simple, but a lot of them are a bit more 3D. So this is some of the new stuff. And then over here, most of our existing families are this trifold style, but you can see the variety in shapes available, and it's way more accurate and realistic than the out of the box Revit stuff, or even for some of those uh, custom made lollipop trees that can kind of conform to different sizes. This just gives you much more of an accurate feel as to how the landscape's going to look, especially when you get into things like multi-stem trunks like this. So for a dawn redwood, I probably go with maybe even an evergreen. By the way, these materials are linked into Revit, so you can change them, but they are the same material for all deciduous, all conifer, all evergreen, and all palm. So I'm going to go with evergreen. And dawn redwood would probably be more like so indecisive. I'm actually going to go with this one. So that is linked to that 2D symbol. And you can even go in and start assigning a photo symbol if you want to. We're currently working on our photo library being linked to the schedule, but you can go ahead and start assigning these. It links right now to a Google search, Google image search, and we are going to add into here also the ability to link to photos on your computer as well that you've taken yourself. I'm going to leave that for now, and we're just going to say okay. And this is ready. We're going to be able to see that 2D and 3D preview over here, and we can go ahead and start placing this. So that's one of these symbols placed, and I can go into 3D view. And you can see it placed in here. If I change my visual style to shaded, you can see that in here. And one thing I'm going to feature a little bit more later on is you can start to see those root balls actually automatically place themselves in. So let's go really quickly over ground covers. But first are there any other questions that would be a really good fit right now?
Oh, just people love the love the 3D symbols. They really are amazing. Yeah. So, just been
And a
it's been
lot of work.
I was just that's exactly what I was just gonna say. This has been an incredible amount of work. So, it's nice to if people to uh,
I think
didn't find that. Hmm.
we started the family upgrade project about this time last year. And I think we had like maybe 10 deciduous symbols, and now we have 50, rapidly approaching 80 different ones. Yeah, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I kind of wanted to transition at this point then over to something where I've done a little bit more work so I can show you these next examples of how to use the tools in more of a realistic scenario rather than just that very simple drawing. So here I have this project set up. I have my site view nicely laid out as a landscape plan. And obviously I've placed a lot of symbols in there. Let's go through and actually have a look at those ground covers. So if I click on some of these ground covers, I can see a hatch and a color to it. Uh, and all of these have different hatches assigned. So if I go into here and edit that, you can see more information about that You can see that it has a spacing of 12 inches. This is going to directly tie into the parameters in here for this plant. So I can go ahead and, if you want to assign color to these, by the way, you can just go to the color tab and click on it. And that opens up our color palette for you to choose from. This is editable, but currently just editable on the CAD side. But there's so many colors in there, you're not going to have a problem. I'm going to say okay. And if I want to place that somewhere, I can go down here and let's say I want to place some tulips here in this floor. You can place ground covers on floors, toposolids, or toposolid subdivisions. Works with all of them. Toposolids are only in 2024 and 2025. There we go. It's placed, and it basically converted that floor to a type tied to that plant. And then now is a great time to have a look at what it's actually doing data-wise for that data that you saw. So in here, if I scroll down, I can see all of those land FX parameters in here already filled out with the botanical name, the common name, as well as information in here like that each count, where was that? Each count right here. So it took the area of this floor that I placed this plant on, and it took the spacing that I assigned to this plant, so down here, and Land Effects calculated how many plants will fit into there and assigned that to it. It did that so that I can go up here to label, and I can grab a group label, and I can click on this and pop that down to create a group label that shows that quantity. If you remove that spacing, then it will just show the square footage of that area. But that group label is basically how you label all of these plants. So these families as well also have all of that parameter data in here. And then we have a bunch of tools that you can start using right away once you kind of get these in, where you can copy along. So I can click on a shrub family that I've placed that same way, and I can click on this line and escape. And it's going to place that shrub all the way along. At this point, I can increase or decrease the spacing or tap 1. Oh, that was F1, my bad. Tap 1 and actually enter in a spacing number to change that. So if I wanted to change that to 10 feet, if you're in a metric drawing, it will ask you for metric units, and that's them at 10-foot spacing. I can also go through here and use tools like fill with plants. So again, this is if you don't want to show these ground covers, these plants as hatches, and you want to actually show them as families in 3D as well, you can always use fill with plants. So I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to grab this plant right here. And fill with plants is also should be in here, but if I go over here and now select this floor, again, also works with toposolids and toposolid subdivisions. I can choose rectangular or triangular spacing. It defaults to the size of the symbol because it knows that data. And I'm going to say, okay, yes. And that's going to fill in all those symbols as best it can in that area. And these are individual ones, so I can go through and fine tune this to all of these. Then I can continue labeling, group label, grab this. And we have that label. And here's, if you want some more evidence of how awesome Revit is, these labels are so easy to just move around, and they even give you little guides. Let's see if it'll pop up. It'll usually give me like a little guide to align it with another style, with another tag as well. So really handy for all of that. But once I've got this all labeled, you might somehow have worked out a way to label everything yourself in Revit, but I guarantee what you do not have is verify labels. If I click verify labels, it will go through this drawing and actually tell me what I forgot to label and highlight it like this. And I actually like to do this before I start labeling, because what'll happen is if I go through here and just I grab that one, that's where the leader's gonna attach to, and I grab these and I pop it up here, it will unhighlight it as you go around and label. So you can just continue labeling until you don't see any more highlights. And then once you're completely done, uh, it will just tell you that it's all correctly labeled. So that's one powerful tool. You also likely don't have highlight. So if I want to click highlight from here, I can click one of these plants and see all of its placed instances very visually and nice and bright around the plan. I can also use highlight here in the plant manager. I can pick a species and it will even highlight floors. So it will throw that red line around a floor if you are highlighting a ground cover, so you can see where everything is. You can also use highlight on one of these labels just to verify uh, exactly which plants it's labeling. And then, of course, a very commonly used label style is connecting line, and we do have that as well. We also have this tool over here, adjacent plants, which just makes it really easy to select one species, and it just automatically selects them all. So you can move them as a group or delete them, whatever you need to do. Lastly, let's think about this. We have mimic. So if I want to just switch out an entire species, for instance, I want these to be this species instead. I can go up here to clone and mimic, and I can go to mimic and just swap this out. And it is going to replace all of those instance parameters on that family as well. And we are going to go a little bit over an hour just to kind of get everything in. But I wanted this to be a very good baseline for everybody. So let's see where I'm at. Okay, so obviously after going through all of those tools, you can also see more information about a plant by clicking on it. You can see all of that plant info in a much more user-friendly interface than over here. And you can even change things. So you can even change the symbol, you can change anything about this, the size, and it will change it for all the symbols in here. But this is, again, connecting to your office standards. So for BIM managers, this is a great example of being able to manage your office standards in terms of all of these plant sizes, just using the ones that are most used for your office in your region. So of course, after all of that, everybody wants to schedule. All you need to do is just click the plant schedule, and LandFX automatically creates a Revit schedule called plant schedule and puts all of the species and parameters that you need into it. So it does create a separate schedule for the ground covers versus the families, just because we are still developing a method to combine them. There are multi-category schedules, but they just have some problems with being able to merge columns when needed. So we're still kind of playing around with the best course of action. You can always, since this is just a regular Revit schedule item, you can always go in here into fields. I do have a power tip on how to kind of go through all of that. And you can manipulate this and add in whatever land effects parameters that we have created into here, just like you can with everyday Revit. So definitely hit up some videos on how to manipulate schedules, and we do have, like I said, we do have one as well on how to manipulate this, even to include the create this into a cost estimate. And this symbol column down here is what is connecting to all of those JPEGs. So if I now go over to my sheet where I have this set up, I can go, let's manipulate this up so that I can go look at my schedules that got created. There's my plant schedule. I can just drag and drop this one down into here, and you can see that it has all of those symbols filled out for all of those plants. And it's separating out plant groups, so you are able to manipulate what group everything goes into. Over here, that's one option as well when you edit a plant. And then, of course, I can grab that ground cover schedule and kind of put it over here, or maybe below it if you have space. And that's showing all those hatches as well. One other thing I wanted to show was color in these landscape plans. So you might have a Revit view where you want it to look a little bit more colorful. We have colors already baked into all of our 2D family symbols. So you can do this manually, but it's way faster using the color render tool, as well as the color render tool allows you to color those ground cover floors and toposolids as well. So it's going to go through here, and for families, really all it's doing is changing the visibility graphics to medium detail level for planting objects only, and setting the transparency of the planting objects to 50%, but it's doing it automatically. And then for ground covers, it's actually going into those floor and toposolid types and adding that color into there automatically. And of course, you can edit the ground covers and you can change that, and you can turn color render on and off, and it will fix all of that. So you can do all of that and more. So I did want to do a quick spotlight then on new features before going into our roadmap. So for the new features, one of the big ones is our plant tags. You might have noticed that in past webinars, if you've watched those, I'm just going to close this and go back to my landscape plan. You might have noticed that we featured mostly a very simple boxed call out, whereas in this webinar, we're seeing a cross call out, and it turned out my preference set was actually set when I labeled this one to a slightly different style. This is planting tag 01, and this is planting tag 08. These numbers correspond to the same styles as is on our CAD plugin. And if you want to explore through these styles, you can go over under preferences to your planting preferences. And you can go to plant tag and drop that down and choose from, these are our available ones. Plant 16 is that default rectangle tag that we originally had, but the rest of these correspond to how we have it on the CAD side. We're just still working on a visual representation of these, but you can switch these over. And it's, for instance, if I look at tag 15 and set that and say, okay, and then I'm going to delete this and I'm going to tag these. There we go. It's just downloading that tag style, but that tag style looks like a shape with a shadow behind it once it kind of loads in. My Revit's going a little bit slow because I'm showing all this over Zoom at the same time. So this one, tag 15, is this circle shape. So we have the regular rectangle shapes. Let's kind of move this so you can see it. There we go. We have rectangle shapes, or sorry, square shapes and hexagon shape, as well as all of these regular kind of line ones. And they are utilizing a new font that we have brought in called Graphite. that now works in Revit because we have the exclusive um, use right now for the TTF of graphite. So it looks really nice like that. You can play around with that, or you can switch that font to whatever you want. And then another new feature then is our families. So I gave you a really brief look at that, but basically we rapidly expanded all of these families. If I edit this one, to have just so many more symbols and so many more 3D symbols. That's all in here. And like I mentioned, these are LAFX materials that you can manipulate in the materials manager in Revit if you would like to. If I look at the shrubs, let's have a really brief look at those ones, and I'll edit that one. Right now, we are on the cusp of 1,000 of these. We were going to have 1,000, but I have a few little tweaks to the next batch that I want to do before making them live. But if you notice, some of these have like a flower color. You will notice in the material manager that these flower colors are actually exclusive to each of these families. We didn't want to completely bombard the material library in your Revit project with so many materials, but we did want to allow you to color one perennial, one color, and another perennial family another color. So the flowers and any fruits are unique to perennial 022 or perennial 023. And our kind of philosophy here is we are not telling you what species these are. We are letting you use your judgment on what these billboards look like and what the 2D symbols look like to decide which one you want to assign to the species, the unique one of 50 whatever thousand species in the world you want to look like, because there's no way we're ever going to be able to make 50,000 families. Another new feature, all the ground cover hatches. So if I go over to ground covers, and I'm just going to edit one of these, we're going to go in, and you can see all of these hatches are now in here. And I will talk a little bit more about these, I think, on our roadmap, but actually, no, I can say it right now. For the hatches, we are experimenting with an even better hatch creation process, and we'll be launching those this summer. So it will contain more hatches. It will allow us to make more hatches faster, and also all of the hatches will perform a lot better too. So that is in the process, in progress. Another new feature is, this is a big one. Hinted at it at the beginning of this, automatic root ball settings in the plant size preferences. So in 3D here, when I placed that tree, you saw that it had a root ball assigned to it. This is so easy for you to set up and have it automatically placed on a tree. So if I go to a tree, let's say this one, and I'm going to look at, bring this out so I can see more of its sizes. So this tree in particular is a 42-inch box. And when I place it, so I'm double clicking this, by the way, to place it, but you can also highlight it and click the place button. But when I place it, there's no root ball as it does its preview. And if I go to place another one, there's no root ball. But once I press escape to end the command, then LandFX will place the root ball it has determined is associated with that plant size assigned to that species. So let's have a look at what makes this actually show a 42-inch box for a root ball. If I go over to preferences, plant sizes, under plant size preferences, in trees, you will see this root ball column. You can check which plant size field will determine what root ball gets placed. For the most part, most people will have it on the first one. Then when you go down through these sizes, when you first use this, you are not going to see this information down here. I happen to have gone through all of these and assigned it. Um, and this is kind of different from region to region, so we decided not to standardize it and just leave it up to your expertise. You can go through and if I go to 46" then 42, yeah, 42" is my first root ball size, and then box is the second one that's not associated with the root ball. But 42" is pretty much always going to be a box. I could go to root ball and I can see the different shapes. So I can set this to no root ball if I wanted to, or I can choose a sphere or ball or circle shape. I can do a box shape, and I can do a pot shape, which basically just has a tapered edge. One note on the pot shape, don't do the width below 9" because the taper will just cause an error, because it will cross itself at the bottom of the pot. So if you need a pot that's less than 9" probably go with a box. Uh, So in this case, I set it to a box. I would set the width to 42" and I can set the height to literally anything. I'm just going to set it to 42" and you can do a backfill. In the case of the box is kind of in this area that you don't really do too much of a backfill or extra excavation. I'm told with boxes, I don't work with boxes too much. I normally do wire baskets, and pots and bare root and burlap. But if you want to show that extra excavation area around it, you can do like 3 times the root ball size, like that, and set it that way. I'm going to cancel because I'm going to keep it as it was before. But you can go through those, and then when you place a tree, it will read what has been set there. It will place our root ball family. It will pin the root ball family to the tree. So if I now move the tree, the root ball moves with it. And if I delete the tree, the root ball deletes as well. And it's going to set all of the parameters and basically the visualization parameters and the size of the whole root ball is going to set those to what you set in the plant sizes automatically for you. So you don't even need to think about it. You just need to set it up once for your office and it's done. It will always put those in. Of course, these are, you can go through your visibility graphics in a view and you can show these root balls or not. We do have it so that by default in a plan view, these root balls just show as dashed lines. So that's an example of a box where the excavation and the box itself are one over top of each other. But there's like a ball style that has a 3-to-1 excavation zone. So you can very easily check what that might be clashing with, like a curb or some hardscape right beside it. And I think that's it for new features. So let's kind of move over to the roadmap and quickly address any questions before the roadmap on the usability and the new features.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we just got people asking, like for instance, asking if we're going to be also improving the Rhino plugin, which we will,
Yes.
um, and confirming, how those ground covers were placed. That is onto a floor is the recommended. Is it floor or it can also be placed right onto a topo solid? Is that right?
Yes, this is a toposolid over here, and these are actually toposolids in here. I've separated them out by walls, but that is a toposolid. You can place it on there. You can also do toposolid subdivisions. So that's just if you have a toposolid and edit sketch. Oh, right. I need to unpin this toposolid in order to edit the sketch. I can subdivide it And I'm just going to do a rectangle and check. So that's part of the toposolid. And if you change the toposolids elevations, the contours inside the subdivision will change dynamically as well. But I can grab that ground cover and let's place this one. Click it down here. And that just places into this area. I'm able to label it. It's going to turn up on the schedule, all of that stuff.
Great. And, also people asking about, the detail module and also getting those color render symbols in the schedule. So,
Yeah.
both, of course, on our timeline, on our radar, the both are going to be challenging. The getting the color into the schedule is going to be particularly tricky
Mm-hmm.
because we want to enable users to be able to pick any color in the world. And so how do we merge in a on the fly color choice, um, into that um, image? So
Yeah.
couple we're pondering ways we can do that.
We've been
uh,
bouncing around like I know that you can show symbols in a legend as opposed to a schedule. But this it's a kind of a weird workaround. So I'm still bouncing that idea around on how you might be able to get more of a dynamic look at each family and each the hatch though will probably be a problem in there as well. Um, Especially with the color in there. So yeah, we like having all of that ability. I think right now our current thought is maybe switching instead of JPEGs, seeing if we can switch that over to transparent PNGs to allow
Correct.
that.
Yeah, I think that's essentially going to be the only viable way to do it is just put the color down and then a transparent PNG on top of that. But
Ooh, so
even that is much easier said than done.
yeah. Hey, let's
Because
let's I'll pull up my roadmap, but really quick,
mhm,
1 minute before I do that, I forgot to show if you want to learn how to use land effects really quick, hover over any of these tools and tap F1. So obviously hovering over it gives you a little bit of an idea of what's happening here. But if you tap F1, that will actually open up our Revit documentation that you can go through and find that tool. I think we just moved our website over, so very imminently that will actually link to the real page. It did before, but with the website link, with the website change, we just need to reconnect all of those, and we're still working through them. But at the very least, that will bring you to our Revit overview page where you can kind of go through all of these tools like edit plant, mimic, clone, highlight plant, all of those, fill with plants tool and just see more about them. And usually they have a video inside of them that you can learn a bit more about. If you ever have any problems though, other than I told you how to open a ticket from our website, but you can also open it from right here in Revit. So if you just have a really quick question, you can always open up this and just ask us, and we will reply same day. But yeah, let me go ahead and pull up the last few slides. So Planting FX roadmap, your feedback actually matters. Everybody watching this right now, your feedback matters. We're still in the beginning stages of this plugin. It's viable and usable absolutely right now, but it's still growing rapidly, and you get a chance to impact not only the priority of our roadmap, but also um, how those tools are shaped and what they deliver. You can give us feedback as to what you need in particular, and we will pay attention to it and probably absolutely merge it into our ideas so that we get a better overall thing. So, probably a question. I'm not sure if this one came in already, but yeah, 2025 support imminent. We are working on that right now. Basically 2025 came with a big .NET 8 change, which we need to redo a few things, and while we're redoing them, we discovered some things that we can do new. So we are cooking up some new features that take advantage of this. So that should be in, I want to say like a few weeks to probably max a month or two.
Okay, I think more likely about 2 weeks max, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm,
And then this is a big one that has been asked by many people, and many
mhm.
people are probably smiling just looking at it. Type parameters for plants. Um, we have seen the light, and we are moving over to it. So now we are just trying to figure out how we figured out how to do it, but right now most of the work that we're doing is working out how to switch over all of your existing projects. Our goal for that you can expect, and by the way, this is going to be again within a month, is that existing designs will not change. We will be able to see that and not immediately change them to type parameters. They will just keep using instance parameters for now. Uh, then you will have an option to upgrade old designs to type parameters, although we're trying to figure out how feasible that might be. So that's kind of a maybe. At the very least, I will provide a documentation on how to update to type parameters. And then all new designs that you use. So if you open up a Revit file and it doesn't have any of our plants with instance parameters on it, it will just automatically use type parameters. And with that, that should open up a few new things that I want to implement, like slightly more dynamic labels, especially for ground covers, and also possibility of more dynamic quantities in the schedule. But that one's a little bit more tricky, especially with ground covers. We're still working on it. But that it opens up that world of possibility. So we have decided that absolutely we're going to do it. And we're going to do it ASAP. Another future roadmap in the works. I got permission to show this from Forrest, but basically, this plant portfolio is something that is coming in. People have asked us if we could output. Basically, they asked us if we could output our plant photos to documents, like cut sheet documents. And we are doing that. It's going to have photos. It's going to have all those colors in the data. You are going to be able to choose what the page size is and what kind of information is in here. It's going to have our horticulturalist information, as well as uh, some of the data tags associated with it in a nice display format. So that is in the works. That is by this summer at the latest. And then let's go back over to here. We are working out a way to do mix and match 2D and 3D. So we decided to go as fast as we could to get as many different symbols as we could with, right now we're just playing with how to allow kind of shell families with it still reading in and scaling the plant family to match a dynamically created family with a 2D family and a 3D family and put it all together. So we're just working on that one, but this should be this year. And then concept plants and mixes. I have a prototype of that manager. So it is well on its way and should be done this year. And then we have Heard You, and Hardscape is on our imminent radar. We already have all the hatches in CAD. We might as well bring them over into Revit. It's pretty easy. So that will be right after all of this is kind of completed. That will be our next focus. And then, of course, I want to give you those pie in the sky kind of things. They're more real than just pies in the sky. We are definitely looking at them, and they are definitely the direction that we are going. But having our detail manager also work in Revit, the first phase of that is creating detail system version 2 in CAD that will basically make any details created in CAD Revit compatible with our Revit plugin, and then bringing in more of our generic content like Boulder blocks and all of that, we're first bringing them into SketchUp, and then we're gonna, based on how we've been doing our plants, we're gonna be able to do them with with 3D of all of our generic content, and also trying to bring in more of our manufacturers into Revit to make it as easy to select those manufacturers in Revit as you have found it on our CAD plugin, which will, of course, then lead to bringing in all of our Ref Note Manager functionality in addition to those hardscapes we talked about, but then bringing in amenities and lengths and schedules and tags and all of that. Yeah. So that is about everything that I wanted to cover. Any final questions that you think might be really good for this moment, Jer?
Um, I think, I think we got it. Actually, there was a lot of questions and little ones, but like for instance, yes, we do work great with the environment plugin. So actually, a lot of and that's kind of generally true for any plugins that the chances of them quote unquote conflicting is very slim to none, especially in an environment like Revit.
Mhm.
But yeah, so for the most part, you could install every known plugin there is for Revit, including ours, and they'd all work fine.
Yeah, and
But
we work well with Enscape too. So
exactly. So plenty more coming. I think the main thing is I would just leave everyone with a very simple thought, which is, as you can see, there's a lot on our plate. We aren't going to be able to breathe for 2 years here. All vacations are canceled until 2029. Um,
wait.
yeah, no, but any feedback you guys can give us on your desires and more your necessities versus a desire, that's always very, very helpful. So many people will say, "Oh, I'd love it if your software could do XYZ." And we go, "Oh my gosh, we've got to add XYZ." And we add that, and then even the original person would go, "Oh, well, yeah, I decided not to do that." I mean, it happens literally all the time. And so, it's always very helpful just to hear the difference between a requirement and a pie in the sky wish. So
Mhm,
it just helps us to prioritize, and we want to make sure we get all your requirements as soon as possible, and at least note your pie in the skies, and we eventually get to those as well. But that being said, hey, it is a gorgeous day here. I'm going to go enjoy the day. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Keep the ideas coming, like we said, and we'll see you next time.